There are moments when reality feels slightly misaligned, not broken, not chaotic, just off. Moments when you sense that something important is happening beneath the surface of ordinary life, but no one around you seems to notice. You wake up, go through your routines, scroll, work, speak, sleep, yet a quiet awareness follows you everywhere. A feeling that the world is changing in ways that aren't being announced. Most people dismiss this feeling. They call it imagination, stress, overthinking. But what if it's something else? What if that subtle discomfort is not confusion, but recognition? Throughout history, every major transformation of human consciousness began this way, not with noise or revelation, but with a quiet internal disturbance, a sense that the old explanations no longer fit, a growing tension between what we are told reality is and what we are privately experiencing. We are taught that intelligence means control, that awareness means mastery, that to be conscious is to dominate, categorize, and explain. But there is another form of knowing, older, quieter, and far more powerful, that doesn't announce itself with words. It arrives as intuition, as pattern recognition, as a feeling that precedes logic. And right now, more people than ever are beginning to sense it. Something in the human mind is shifting, not forward in a straight line, but inward, away from noise, away from constant stimulation, away from the illusion that progress is always loud and visible. The modern world trains us to ignore subtle signals, to override instinct, to trust only what can be measured, repeated, and explained. Yet the most important transformations in human history were never measurable while they were happening. They were only recognized after the fact. Before every intellectual revolution, there was a period of confusion. Before every cultural awakening, there was a phase of discomfort. People felt disconnected, restless, unusually sensitive. They questioned things they had never questioned before. Not because someone told them to, but because they could no longer ignore the quiet pressure building inside their awareness. That pressure is returning. You can see it in the way people are withdrawing from meaningless conversations, in the way silence feels heavier and more necessary than it used to, in the discomfort many feel around artificial optimism and surface-level motivation. The old narratives no longer soothe the mind, and that is not a failure, it is a signal. The human brain evolved to detect patterns long before it learned language, long before it developed systems of belief or science. At its core, awareness is not analytical, it is relational, it senses alignment and misalignment instinctively. When the world changes faster than our conscious explanations, the subconscious notices first. That's what many are experiencing now. A growing awareness that the structure is guiding. Society, work, identity, success, even happiness are misaligned with something deeper, something more fundamental. Not morally wrong, but psychologically incomplete. We are living inside systems designed for survival efficiency, not inner coherence. And the mind knows it. This creates a quiet tension. People feel tired without being physically exhausted, anxious without clear cause, emotionally heavy despite material comfort. It's not depression, it's not weakness, it's cognitive dissonance on a collective scale. When awareness expands, but the environment remains the same, discomfort is inevitable. Throughout history, philosophers warned that the greatest danger to humanity was not ignorance, but unconscious living, acting without awareness, thinking without reflection, moving through life on borrowed beliefs. Today, that danger has become normalized. We automate our thoughts, outsource meaning, replace intuition with algorithms. We are constantly informed, yet rarely aware, and yet Despite this, the quiet shift continues. People are becoming more sensitive, not weaker, more perceptive, more aware of emotional undercurrents, more affected by environments, conversations, and energies they once ignored. This sensitivity is often mistaken for fragility. It is not. Sensitivity is what precedes clarity. Those who sense change early often struggle the most because they are navigating new terrain without a map. They feel things others don't yet perceive. They notice patterns before they are socially acknowledged. And society has never been kind to early perceivers. They are called strange, detached, too serious, too quiet, too intense. But history eventually renames them. What feels like isolation is often preparation. When awareness deepens, the mind begins to reject noise. It becomes less tolerant of superficiality, less interested in performative connection, more drawn to authenticity, depth, and meaning. This can feel lonely, but it is not regression. It is refinement. The mind is recalibrating. Many people try to silence this process. They distract themselves, overstimulate, numb, stay busy, anything to avoid sitting with the discomfort of awareness. But avoidance doesn't stop transformation. It only delays integration. The deeper truth is this: you are not losing alignment with the world. The world is losing alignment with awareness. And those who feel it first are not broken. They are early. This session is not meant to give you answers. It is meant to sharpen recognition, to confirm that what you are sensing is not random, not imaginary, and not a personal failure. It is the opening phase of a psychological shift that always begins quietly. In the next session, we will explore why this shift feels unsettling, why it often manifests as emotional heaviness or withdrawal, and why resisting it creates far more suffering than embracing it. For now, understand this: if you feel different lately, more observant, more distant from shallow noise, more sensitive to what feels false, you're not drifting away from yourself. You are returning, and this is only the beginning. The discomfort doesn't come from awareness itself. It comes from resisting what awareness reveals. When the mind begins to see more clearly, it also begins to see contradictions it once ignored, patterns that no longer make sense, habits that once felt normal but now feel hollow, beliefs inherited without question that suddenly feel foreign. This is where many people panic. They assume something is wrong with them, that they're becoming negative, detached, or unmotivated. They try to fix themselves, force optimism, chase productivity, drown the silence with noise, but clarity always feels like loss before it feels like freedom, because clarity removes illusions, and illusions, no matter how false, are comforting. The mind is designed to seek coherence. When your internal awareness evolves faster than your external life, coherence breaks. You may still be living according to old scripts: success, identity, approval, routine, while internally recognizing that those scripts no longer reflect who you are. That mismatch creates friction. You feel restless without knowing why. Conversations feel repetitive. Achievements feel strangely empty. You might even feel guilty for feeling dissatisfied because nothing is technically wrong, but something is wrong, just not in the way you were taught to recognize. You were outgrowing an outdated mental framework. Every psychological transition follows this pattern. First comes awareness, then disorientation, then resistance, and finally, integration. Most people never reach the last stage, not because they can't, but because they retreat when things get uncomfortable. They choose familiarity over truth. Awareness demands responsibility. Once you see clearly, you can no longer pretend you didn't. No, you can't unsee misalignment. You can't unknow emptiness. The mind begins asking questions it used to avoid. Why am I doing this? Who is this for? What am I actually afraid of losing? What part of me is being silenced to maintain comfort? These questions are destabilizing, not because they are dangerous, but because they expose how much of life is lived on autopilot. Modern systems reward unconsciousness, predictability, compliance, distraction. They do not encourage reflection, stillness, or deep self-examination. A mind that questions too deeply becomes harder to control, so the system subtly labels awareness as a problem. You're overthinking. You're too serious. You need to relax. You should just be grateful. But awareness isn't negativity. It's sensitivity to truth. The emotional heaviness many feel during this phase isn't sadness, it's grief. Grief for illusions dissolving. Grief for identities that no longer fit. Grief for the realization that much of life was built around expectations that were never consciously chosen. This grief is necessary. It clears space. Think of awareness like light entering a dark room. At first, it's uncomfortable. It exposes dust, cracks, disorder. You might prefer the darkness, not because it was better, but because you didn't have to see. But once the light is on, cleaning becomes possible. Many try to turn the light back off. They retreat into old habits, old roles, old distractions. They convince themselves the discomfort was a phase, a mistake, a mood, and for a while that works. Until the awareness returns, stronger, because once consciousness expands, it does not contract willingly. The people who suffer most are not those who awaken, but those who awaken and then betray themselves to maintain comfort. That betrayal creates internal conflict, anxiety, emotional numbness, a sense of living someone else's life. The mind begins to split, one part, knowing the truth, the other suppressing it. This is exhausting. True stability doesn't come from clinging to certainty. It comes from learning how to move with uncertainty without losing yourself. The shift you're experiencing is not asking you to abandon your life. It's asking you to stop living unconsciously inside it. That starts with silence. Silence is not emptiness. It's where awareness organizes itself. It's where the nervous system recalibrates. It's where intuition becomes audible again. That's why noise feels unbearable during this phase. Endless stimulation keeps awareness fragmented. It prevents integration. Your discomfort is a signal to slow down, not quit, not escape, but observe. To notice where you act out of fear instead of alignment, where you speak without meaning, where you agree without conviction, where you chase without desire. Awareness doesn't demand immediate action. It demands honesty, and honesty destabilizes illusions. This is why many feel alone during this phase, not because they're isolated, but because they can no longer fully participate in shallow connection. Depth becomes necessary. Authenticity becomes non-negotiable. This doesn't make you superior. It makes you responsible. The world doesn't need more loud opinions or reactive minds. It needs grounded individuals who can think clearly without being consumed by noise. People who can sit with discomfort without numbing it, who can feel deeply without being controlled by emotion. That capacity is forming now, but it requires patience. Integration is slower than awakening. It's less dramatic, less exciting. It happens quietly through small internal shifts. How you listen, how you respond, how you choose. And in the final session, we will explore what happens when this awareness stabilizes, how clarity replaces confusion, how stillness becomes strength, and how those who complete this transition begin influencing the world without force. If this session resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to The Quiet Paradox. The final session completes the transformation. There comes a moment when the noise no longer pulls at you. Not because the world gets quieter, but because something inside you stabilizes. This is the point most people never reach. Not because it's hidden, but because it requires something modern life discourages. Patience without reward, clarity without validation, strength without performance. After awareness, after discomfort, comes integration. Integration is when the mind stops fighting itself. You no longer feel the need to explain why certain things don't interest you. You stop trying to justify your silence. You stop seeking permission to live in alignment with what feels true. Not dramatically, not defiantly, quietly. This is where real power begins. Up to this point, awareness may have felt like a burden, like seeing too much, feeling too deeply, standing slightly outside the rhythm of the world. But once integrated, awareness becomes grounding instead of destabilizing. You no longer drown in perception. You stand on it. Clarity replaces anxiety because confusion was never the problem. Resistance was. You were fighting the shift instead of allowing it to settle. When integration happens, your nervous system recalibrates. You stop reacting to everything. You stop absorbing every emotional current around you. You become selective, not out of apathy, but discernment. This is where most misunderstand you. They assume you've become distant, cold, uninterested. In reality, you've become centered. You still feel deeply, but you're no longer controlled by feeling. You still think deeply, but you're no longer trapped in thought. You engage with the world without being consumed by it. This is rare. Most people live externally. Their identity is shaped by reaction, likes, fears, trends, pressure, expectations. Their sense of self fluctuates based on approval and resistance. An integrated mind does not. It moves differently. You notice it first in how little you need to say. Words become precise. Silence becomes comfortable. You don't rush to fill space. You don't rush to prove understanding. You listen, not to respond, but to observe. You also notice it in what no longer hooks you. Drama feels exhausting instead of exciting. Arguments feel hollow. Validation feels unnecessary. Even ambition shifts from proving to building, from chasing to refining. This doesn't mean you disengage from life. You engage on your own terms. Integrated awareness doesn't seek attention. It attracts it without effort. People feel calmer around you, though they may not know why. Your presence carries weight, not volume. This is the paradox. The quieter you become internally, the more influence you gain externally. Not through dominance, but through coherence. Your actions align with your values. Your choices reflect understanding instead of impulse. You stop splitting yourself into public and private versions. What you think, feel, and do begin to match. That alignment creates trust in yourself first, and self-trust changes everything. You no longer second-guess every decision. You move slower, but with certainty. You don't need constant reassurance because your internal signal is clear. This is where intuition stops being mystical and becomes practical. You sense when to speak, when to wait, when to leave, when to stay. Not because you calculated every outcome, but because you're paying attention. An integrated mind does not need to control the future. It responds accurately to the present. This is why such people often seem lucky. Opportunities find them, the right conversations happen, the right paths open, not magically, but because awareness makes you responsive instead of reactive. You see what others miss because they are busy performing. You choose what others avoid because they are afraid of silence. And slowly, without announcing it, your life simplifies. Not smaller, cleaner. You stop carrying identities that no longer fit. You stop maintaining connections that require you to betray yourself. You stop chasing goals that impress others but empty you. This creates space, and in that space, something unexpected happens. Purpose emerges, not as a grand mission, but as a natural extension of who you are. You contribute not because you're trying to matter, but because clarity naturally expresses itself. You influence without convincing. You lead without declaring leadership. You inspire without trying to inspire. This is why integrated awareness often feels invisible at first. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't seek applause, but its effects are undeniable. The world is shaped not by the loudest minds, but by the clearest ones. Every era is changed by people who can see without needing consensus, who can think independently without becoming isolated, who can feel deeply without becoming unstable. If you've made it to this point in the journey, understand this. You were never meant to fit comfortably into unconscious systems. You were meant to move through them with awareness intact. The discomfort was not a sign to stop. It was a sign you were shedding noise. The silence was not emptiness. It was alignment forming. And the calm you may now feel is not indifference. It is integration. You are not late. You are not early. You are exactly where this path leads. And if this series resonated with you, if it articulated something you felt but never had words for, share your thoughts below. Comment what part of this journey you're currently in.